Hello, Italy, and thank you to the Italian Insurtech Association for the opportunity to talk about the Japanese insurance and Insurtech ecosystem. I'd like to do this in three parts, covering some basics about Japan first, then insurance, and then Insurtech. So let's start. Japan has an aging and declining population, which also leads to a depopulation of rural areas and very much an aging population. Japan still is the third largest economy in the world. And if you look at the Tokyo metropolitan area in isolation, it's actually among the top 20. So Italy sits somewhere between Japan and Tokyo. Now, many people perceive Japan as a high-tech country, and that's true on the manufacturing side. As a friend always used to say, the archetypical Japanese companies produce things. Now, the service sector is a different story. There's lots of paper, there's still fax machines, and you have the hanko, this personal stamp here. Many documents still require this as a kind of signature. And so during the pandemic, that led to people actually having to go to the office to stamp documents to make them official. That's a major obstacle to digitalization. It's something where the pandemic hopefully now is a catalyst. Let's talk a bit about insurance. The Japanese insurance market overall is the second largest in the world. It's actually mostly driven by life insurance. In general insurance, P&C, it's a little bit less. We have a super high concentration in the general insurance market. There are three large insurance groups that make up 90% of market share, pretty much 30% each. So give and take a percentage point or so. Also, their insurance books are 50% motor insurance. So obviously, motor insurance and health are the areas where we're expecting the most change in the insureds over the coming years, so that will have a significant impact. And like many other markets in Asia, 90% of the insurance gets sold through agents, and it can be insurance shops like these Hoken no Madoguchi, literally translated as window into insurance, or it can be individual captive agents. So there's not much digitalization that happens. There's not much e-commerce transaction volume going through the internet just yet. It's all agent and person-to-person relationship driven. Japan will experience what is generally known as the digital cliff 2025. And so there are quite a number of initiatives underway to push towards more digitalization, to train people to take the jobs of the software engineers that are going to retire, and to drive the large companies to replace the core systems that are just aging and aging and aging. And so just a few weeks ago, among the listed companies on the Tokyo Stock Exchange, digital transformation champions were nominated. And in the insurance sector, Sompo Holdings, which is one of the three large groups that we talked about in the general insurance area, won the prize. So let's take a closer look at them. A few years back, they hired a gentleman, Narazaki-san, as a group chief digital officer at the board level, who had an extensive experience in Silicon Valley, grew up in that ecosystem. He had a few exits, and so his single purpose in life now is to transform Sompo into a digital player. Part of that is they've created innovation centers in Tokyo, Silicon Valley, and Tel Aviv. So if you're actually looking to engage with the company, you don't necessarily need to do this as the mothership in Tokyo. And sometimes these Japanese companies are a bit more inclined to engage in their international offices. Once proven there, then they can take it to the head office, which might be a bit more conservative. Don't forget that because we have a shrinking market here, many of the insurers have significant international businesses. So if you look at Tokyo Marine Group, for example, they already generate more than 50% of the revenue from outside Japan. So whether we call them Japanese insurer still is debatable. There's certainly different factions in the group that drive that. If you look at Japanese corporates overall, they tend to be in the late majority of adoption. So some company like Sompo might be the early majority, but overall, Japanese corporate would touch new technology only if it is no longer new, if it has already been proven, right? If everybody else has implemented it, then it's safe. And that makes it very difficult at times for startups, because obviously you're presenting something new and that needs to overcome quite a bit of resistance. That is changing thanks to lots of people's efforts, but it's still a relatively slow process. So quick look at Insurtech. If you really want to build an insurance business in Japan, you have an opportunity to apply for small amount and short-term insurance, also known as SSI, that has the benefit of very low capital requirements, about 100,000 US dollars. It obviously has restriction in terms of the policies that you can write, the premium income that you can have, etc. But it is actually a very fertile ground also for the incumbent insurers to experiment with new technologies. So all of the large insurers have at least one of these entities, but there's only one startup that has achieved this license, and that is Just In Case. They started off in 2018. In June, they obtained this license, and since then they've got now 5 different products to the market. They started off with a mobile phone insurance, and the latest product now is in health. So everybody else is not licensed as an insurer. They're a software provider, or they might act as an insurance broker like Sasuke. They are a wealth management app, a life financial planner, and they also act as an insurance broker for life insurance. Now, they are unique because they have put quite a bit of effort into a very simple UI UX design, which is still unique in Japan. Interfaces tend to be very complicated here, and not necessarily that people love it, but the people who built the systems, which are largely outsourced system integrators, believe that people love them. And so it becomes a bit of a cycle. This will also need to break when we talk about digitization. 2 more comments here to round it out. Unique things to Japan. Japan basically has its own social media manager, social network. This is Line. Line is a messenger. And by now it probably has 85 million monthly average users. And it's totally dominant. So if you think about having a chatbot, for example, building advertising, right, having your own page, Line is where you have to go. So a slight tweak from what you might be used to from like Facebook or WhatsApp, etc. Lastly, the Japanese consumer is very demanding. So mistakes are not allowed, right? And you always fix the mistakes. And representation of that is the wrapping. So it's nerve-wracking at times when you see this wasteful packaging, and it can be beautiful like this one, but often it's just for the appearance and doesn't have any functional value. And it again comes with the simplicity versus complexity question that we discussed. So things are still very complicated, and they are unnecessarily complicated. Part of that is lots of paper, fax machines, and this stamp, this Sanko that we've seen. All of that, hopefully, over the coming years with digitalization will change and will disappear. So if you have an offering in this space that eliminates paper, or it helps companies be more efficient, then Japan will be a very promising market for you over the coming years. So please get in touch if you want to hear more. This concludes my comments, and I'd like to thank again the Italian Insurtech Association for inviting us to briefly talk about Japan. Thank you.